Today we're going to be working on kind of a fun project. I'm going to be making a small camp stove out of 3 common cans that you can take right out of your recycling or your neighbor's recycling or wherever you may find them, or you may have them in the pantry, and as you use them up, save the cans. I'm going to be using a number 1 can. It's just some pearl olives. Actually, this is a number 1/2 size can. This is a number 1 can. This one happens to be garbanzo beans. It can be any number 1 can, which is your typical, your average size can. This one's got a pull top. These are all going to require an opener. It really doesn't matter. It's a quick down and dirty project. And then the 3rd can is a number 2 can. It's what usually you get your pie fillings in. It's the same height as a number 1, but it's a little bit bigger in diameter, and I can give all of the measurements of the cans I'm using for anybody who wants to be super accurate. But you can use any cans as long as this one can fit inside of this one, and this one can fit inside of this one. And that is really all we're going to need for today's project. So it's kind of free, requires a little bit of your time and whatever the cost is on the fruits, vegetables, or whatever that you'll be using. Before we get started, just to explain the type of stove we're making, it's a very small portable camp stove. This one is a gasifier or a reburner. It's super efficient, and it'll burn just about anything. I know here in Connecticut and a lot of other states, if you go camping or hiking, your fire has to be contained. You can't just build open fires anymore. So carrying something small like this around, it weighs next to nothing, is a way that you can contain the fire and put your pot on top, heat up some water or cook whatever you're cooking. This will hold enough fuel for a single person. If you're going to do any larger cooking, like cooking for a couple or for a family, you're going to need something bigger than this, or you're going to have to constantly remove the pot, refuel, and put your pot back on. But the way this works, and this one here, you can see from the bottom, this one was made instead of a fruit can. The larger can here, the number 2 can, was some bush baked beans, but it's the same size can, and there's a removable piece, and there's a piece, the number 1 can is permanently affixed inside. And the way this works is it sucks air through these holes in the bottom. They come up the sides, and the inside can has holes at the bottom to feed air for your fire, and that'll let the fire burn. But once this starts getting hot, it's going to smoke when you first light it up. Once this can gets hot, there's holes on the inside. Convection pulls the air all the way up to the top, and it'll actually burn the smoke that's produced by your fire. So it's a reburner or a gasifier. And it's a lot more efficient. I can throw twigs, leaves, pine cones, whatever I come across in here, and it's going to burn them. And it burns them down to next to nothing. So the ash that's left is really minute. And then the small can, the olive can, that's just riddled with holes, has nothing to do with the stove other than it's going to sit on the top like this. So that way your pot isn't going to snuff out the fire. Whatever pot you put up here is going to sit on top of that small can, and it'll still be able to get enough air for the fire to keep going. And then when you're done, you flip this over and it packs away, and then you just need a container or a bag to put this small little can in. It heats up very fast. When the fire's out, it cools down very fast, and that's great if you're a hiker or you just like being out in the woods. You don't have to wait for the stove to build a large fire, and you don't have to wait a half an hour for it to cool down before you can pack it out. Within 5 minutes, this is cool to the touch. So I can pack it up and keep hiking. So I got my 3 cans. I pulled these out of recycling. Again, an olives can. This may have had like green beans in it, and this was either baked beans or some kind of a fruit pie filling. They're opened in their normal manner. And again, like I said, whether you use a safety opener, the old-fashioned can opener, or if it's a pull tab, doesn't matter. We're gonna start with this. The big can will be first, and whatever side you opened is gonna be the bottom, because we're gonna have to make a special cut on the top of this can so that this one fits snugly inside of it. So we'll start by marking and cutting this can, and then we'll move on to the next step. The first thing we're going to do is take the number 2 can, the larger can, flip that over, and then we're going to take the middle size can and place it as close to center as we can on top. And then we're just going to trace around the bottom of the can, and that's going to let us know where we need to cut the can out. So now that I've got that traced out, I'm going to use either a knife and cut this can open the old-fashioned way, or I may use a Dremel tool. Whatever you have for a tool, buzz out just inside of the line you traced. You don't want to cut on the line or outside of that line. We want to make it a very tight fit, because we can always make it larger, but we can't make it smaller. So get that cut out. I'll show you what mine looks like as soon as it's done, and then we'll go on to the next step. Alright, we got our initial hole cut out. Probably, if you're going to do it the way I did, make sure that adult supervision, and also be careful. You're going to have a very sharp, rough edge here. But I'm going to be taking care of that, in my case at least. I cut just inside of that blue line, and you can see this can still doesn't fit. What I'm going to do now is sand this down, and you can either use a metal file, sandpaper, a Dremel tool, whatever tool you have. Sand this down so it's nice and smooth, and continue to sand until this can just barely fits, because in the end we want it to be a very tight fit. So we'll get this sanded down and then move on to the next step. Finish sanding this out. It's now, I don't want to say smooth, but it's no longer sharp. It doesn't have any burrs on it. And I dry fitted my can. You can see it's a very tight fit. That's kind of what we want. We want to make sure it's in there and it's tight. I'm going to pop it back out. Next thing that I'm going to need to do is on our big can that we have just cut the bottom out of, I'm going to drill a series of holes around the bottom of this can. Once we get that done, this piece is finished and we can move on to drilling holes on this piece. Okay, you don't have to be super accurate as far as where the holes are going to be made on this can, but because I am who I am, I have to make sure the spacing is fairly uniformed. So what I'm going to do is just trace the can, and I'm not going to be doing this perfect, but I'm going to divide the can, say maybe 8 times. And like I said, this isn't super perfect, but it gives me kind of an idea of how I'm going to space those the holes so that they're fairly uniformed. Okay, once I get this kind of marked out, I'm just going to transfer those as dots onto the side of the can here. And then I'm just going to drill on those spots. So I'll finish getting this marked off, and and we'll start drilling, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Alright, now that I've got the can marked, I'm going to pre-drill with a smaller drill bit, and then I'm going to be drilling out the holes with a 5/16 just to make larger holes. Well, I've got 16 more of these to do. Well, not 16 more, 14 more of these to do. And then, like I said, when I'm done, I'm just going to use a 5/16 bit to make the holes bigger. Now that the outer can is all set and we have our holes drilled in, I'll be working on the inner can. This is kind of the combustion chamber, or the burn box of the stove. And this is just a can in its entirety with the top taken off. We're going to use the same pattern, and I'm going to mark this for 16 holes all along the very bottom edge and all around the very top edge. And I'm going to use a smaller drill bit for this one. I'm going to use about a 1/4 inch drill bit. The sizes aren't super important. I do want the bottom holes to be bigger because I'm going to be drawing as much air up into this as I can. And these I'm going to make a little bit smaller. Well, we finished drilling out the inner burn chamber, if that's what you want to call it. And now that this is drilled and this is all set, we could put the two pieces together. So I'm just going to push those together like that. And it looks like a good fit. You can see the inner can is elevated up from the bottom, so it's not touching, let's say, the table. And that allows air to come in through the bottom, up around the space between the two cans, and then in through those bottom holes that we drilled. And that's what's going to feed the fire to get it going. Once this can gets really hot, convection is going to draw air up through the can and out of the inner holes at the top, and those will come in and help combust the gases and the some of the smoke. So what we'll have in the beginning is kind of a smoky fire because it's very contained, and then once this starts heating up, there'll be less and less smoke until it gets to a point where it's almost smokeless. These things are super efficient. And at this point, this is finished. You would just put wood right in here, or twigs or pine cones, whatever it is that you're going to burn. Just drop them right in here, get those lit up, and it'll start burning. But before we're ready to use it to cook on, we're going to make the top out of that olive can, that little can, and it'll pack away just like this. It fits right inside of the other can. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut the bottom off, and we're going to flare this lip out just a little bit so it sits on top of the can like this. Then we have to drill a whole bunch of holes. Here's my original one. This one's kind of old and rusty. I've had it for a few years. But it sits like this, and it lifts your pan off the fire. That way you're not smothering it out. It allows it to breathe. And then when you're done, it packs away just by pushing inside. And let's get this piece cut. I'm going to use I think a safety can opener to open this, just so it's a little bit smoother, but you can use any kind of can opener to take the bottom off of the can. Once that's done, we're just going to riddle this with holes, big holes. I think I used like a 5/16 drill bit to do the older one, and I just created a pattern and just filled it with holes. The idea is you want as much oxygen to get through this as possible. Its only purpose is to suspend your pan. And you can make it out of a mesh wire or something else. I like making it out of a can because it's a lot more stable. I can put a heavy cast iron pan on this and it's not going to collapse. So let's get the bottom cut off. I'll show you what I mean about flaring the edges over. Once all that's done and we know we have a good fit, we'll just drill this out and we're ready to throw some wood in here, light it up, and show you how it works. Well, I finished with the smaller can. I cut the bottom off and drilled a bunch of holes in it. Like I said before, it stores this way, and when you're ready to use it, you just flip it over. Now it kind of fits on the top, but you can see it's a little bit too small. And that's the problem I ran into with the original one I had built a few years back. But I found that if you take a pair of pliers and just grab that edge and give it a little bit of a bend outward, not a lot, just a little bit, and do that all the way around, it'll create kind of a wider, a foot that fits perfectly into the top, where it's very, very stable. So I'm going to go around and bend all of that outward and then make sure I have a good fit. I'll show you where we're at, and then we'll throw some wood in it and fire it up. Well, I finished the top, I flared out the bottom, and now it sits nice and stable on top of my stove. You can see I've got a cast iron pan here, not a problem. And I wouldn't be camping with a cast iron pan, but just to show you, this is nice and strong. So this is pretty much it. It's all set. We'll bring it outside, fire this up, and boil some water. But as a bonus, just to show you, when I do take a can like this, it's a solo cooker, so it's good for one person. So I would call this the greatest stove. It's not even what I use most of the time, but if I'm going out by myself or know that I only need to boil maybe a cup or two of water, this works great. Pack this away, and then I found this iced tea mix container. The whole thing fits nice and snug right in there. So that way I can pack this out without getting soot into my backpack or my rucksack. So look around. Depending on what size cans you use, just find a container you can put it all in, or you can put it in a bag, a canvas sack, or whatever, just to keep your gear from getting dirty, because this is going to have a little bit of soot on it when you're done using it. But anyway, we'll bring it outside, we'll go boil some water, and I'll show you how it works. Another good use for the container is I put my stove down where I'm going to be lighting it, and I use the container to just go around and pick up what I'm going to be using to light my fire. So I've got some nature's paper here to get things started. There's plenty of leaves everywhere. It's that time of the year. And I'm just going to shove these into the can just to get the fire lit. And then I'm going to follow up by putting little scrap pieces of wood that I split up. And I cut all of them, well, broke all of them to about maybe 2 or 3 inches in length. That way they all fit in the can. So let's get this lit, and then I'll show you a close-up of what it looks like while it's burning. Okay, as you can see, it just started going, and I'm going to let this burn down quite a bit before I add some more fuel. I want to cook on a lower flame, but you can see these little individual flames that are coming up all the way around? Those are those jets, and they're pouring air in right now, and they're recombusting the gases that are being released by the fire, and that's what makes this so efficient. I mean, look at the size of this flame, and it's just coming from twigs and logs that I had split all the way down to just little pieces. But you could literally just, whatever garbage there is on the ground, I mean, there's this stuff everywhere. I can break this up, and especially once the fire is going, this is probably not fully dry, but I can throw these in there and burn those as well. Now keep in mind, anything this small, you want to burn the driest wood that you can find, because anything wet is going to put off a lot of moisture, And any moisture that it puts off is going to soot up the bottom of your cook pot or your pan and just make a mess out of everything. So try to use really, really dry wood. Get this thing stuffed with fuel and wait for it to burn down so that the flame is a little bit more manageable. And then once that happens, we're going to take our little stand, our ring. I'm just going to put that right on top. And then I've got a pot of water here that I'm just going to put on top of the flame. Well, as you can see, I probably split more than I needed. I just filled up the container. It's always better to have too much wood than not enough wood, because you don't want to be running around looking for something to burn in the middle of boiling your water. Like any campfire, the first thing you need to do is always prepare your wood first and make sure that you have enough and then some for the amount of time you're going to be burning it. So I used maybe about half the wood that I collected. I burnt that whole handful of leaves just to get things started. And it's still smoking a little bit because I think there's a lot of water in those leaves. So I'm getting a lot of dirty smoke. But once this really gets hot, you can see the jet that's coming up from this. Once that gets nice and hot, whoop, and I may have a boil. Not quite. It's just starting. It takes, with this fire, probably 5 to 10 minutes depending on how much water. I've got a cup of water in here, so maybe 5 minutes with this stove, which is actually pretty fast for a junk burning stove, anything that burns wood. If I put 2 or 3 cups in here, it'd probably take closer to 10 minutes. There was 19 degrees this morning when I got up, so it's kind of chilly out here, and I'm sure the fire is fighting that cold as well, trying to get the water going. But yeah, we've got a simmer going, and it's probably going to be another minute or so before that water boils. But anyway, here's our stove. This is how it works. It's still got a small flame in there. I have plenty of time to make my coffee, hot chocolate, tea, whatever it is you're going to drink. By the time you finish that cup, this can is going to be cold enough to touch. I can just dump the ashes out, and literally there'll be a handful of ashes. Pack it away in my container that I put over there, and then head back out on the trail. Not that I'm hiking. Oh, hold on a second. Movie magic. I'll pack it back up in my container, and in this case, take it back in the house and just add it to my little stove collection. So if you like making stuff like this, if you think this is pretty cool or kind of neat, or you want to give it a shot, doesn't cost you anything but your time, and like I said, maybe you have to go out and buy a can of beans. But you get to eat the beans, so there's the bonus. So anyway, if you like this, if you want to see other bushcraft type videos, leave a comment down below. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up and make sure to share it with your friends. And I'll see you in the next video. I actually split up a lot more than I needed. But like with any campfire, the first thing you want to do is, one second, I'm just going to move over here. The smoke's chasing me. Cut.